Usually when we talk about our own memories, there's this expectation of permanence,
Right, like they're carved in stone somewhere.
Exactly. You think back to your 10th birthday or even just a conversation you had yesterday, and in your mind you can point to it and say, there it is, that happened, that is an objective fact.
But it's really just electrical impulses in your brain.
Right. So what if your memory is the absolute only proof that history happened at all?
Oh, that is a terrifying thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, what if the state decides to just rewrite the historical record every single morning?
Yes.
And the only thing standing between the truth and total erasure is the fragile, easily manipulated human brain.
Well, then you are in incredibly dangerous territory.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are dissecting George Orwell's seminal novel, 1984. And we're not just looking at it as a piece of classic fiction, but as a literal instruction manual for psychological control.
Yeah, we've got a great stack of sources today. We'll be looking at the exact mechanics of how a totalitarian regime systematically dismantles human nature.
It's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters when it comes to human history and objective truth.
We're going to examine the psychological terror of constant surveillance, the deliberate destruction of language, and the ultimate fragility of reality itself.
And before we unpack all these mechanisms of state control, it is super vital to note right up front, we are exploring these concepts completely impartially.
Absolutely. Totalitarianism isn't just a right-wing or left-wing issue.
Exactly. It's a specter that haunts both the extreme left and the extreme right of the political spectrum. Throughout history, these tools have been used by vastly different ideologies.
So we aren't taking a side or endorsing any specific political viewpoint here.
No, not at all. We are simply here to convey, analyze, and understand the brilliant, terrifying ideas contained in George Orwell's original source material. We're looking at the anatomy of power itself.
Precisely, because the true value of this text is that it's a universal warning. It's about the mechanics of power, regardless of the ideological mask that power happens to be wearing at any given moment.
So true.
To really grasp the weight of this, I want you, the listener, to just imagine stepping into London. Or, as it's known in this world, Airstrip 1. It's a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks are striking 13.
That opening line, it is so jarring. The clocks were striking 13.
It instantly sets the tone.
It does. Immediately, you are in a reality where the fundamental rules have been altered by a central authority. I mean, clocks don't strike 13.
Right. Military time exists, but analog clocks don't physically chime 13 times.
Exactly. But to understand the world our protagonist, Winston Smith, is navigating, we really have to understand the mind that engineered it.
Not Big Brother, but the real-world author.
Yes. Eric Arthur Blair, better known as George Orwell. The sources show that this nightmare didn't just spring from a vacuum of dark imagination, It was essentially a documentary of his own life experiences.
It was forged in some of the most intense geopolitical fires of the early 20th century.
So let's talk about his background a bit.
Well, Orwell was born in British India in 1903. He was the son of a civil servant. And as a young man, he actually joined the Indian Imperial Police in Burma.
Which is such a wild pivot when you think about who he became.
It is, but this is where his foundational understanding of authoritarianism begins. He saw firsthand what it meant for one group of people to completely subjugate another.
Right.
But more importantly, he observed the psychological toll that imperialism took. And not just on the oppressed, but on the oppressors themselves.
Oh, that's interesting. So it damages the people in charge, too.
Exactly. He realized that when you wear the mask of a tyrant, your face eventually grows to fit it. He developed this profound, visceral hatred for authoritarian control based on his own actions.
So he resigns, comes back to Europe, and actively seeks out the rawest, most uncomfortable truths of human existence. He lives among the poorest of the poor in Paris and London.
Yeah, he was actively trying to shed his privilege.
But the historical catalyst, the real moment where the DNA of 1984 truly starts to form, seems to be the Spanish Civil War.
That is the crucial turning point, without a doubt. In 1936, Orwell traveled to Spain to fight for the Republican side against the fascists.
And he arrived with a deeply idealistic view of socialism, right?
He did. He actually fought alongside a Marxist militia known as the POUM. But the reality on the ground was incredibly complex and incredibly dark.
Because it wasn't just a straightforward fight against the fascists.
No, not at all. He and his wife, Eileen, narrowly escaped the communist purges in Barcelona in 1937.
Wait, purges by their own side?
Yes. Soviet-backed communists were actively hunting down, imprisoning, and executing other leftist factions who didn't align perfectly with Joseph Stalin's directives.
It's just wild to think that his greatest fear in a war zone wasn't the enemy across the battlefield. It was the supposed allies in his own camp.
Having to run for your life from the people who claim to share your ideology, it completely shattered his worldview.
Did that paranoia directly inspire the concept of the thought police? Because it sounds exactly like it.
It absolutely laid the groundwork for it. It demonstrated to him that tyranny could wrap itself in any flag, use any noble-sounding rhetoric, and still end up putting a bullet in the back of your head for a minor ideological deviation.
Wow.
It made him a lifelong, staunch anti-Stalinist. But if we want to trace the direct lineage of the Ministry of Truth, the propaganda machine in the book, we have to look at his actual day job during World War II.
Okay, let's unpack this, because in 1941, he takes this job at the BBC Eastern Service.
Right, supervising broadcasts to India.
And the explicit goal is to stimulate Indian support for the British war effort. So he knows he is actively engaged in wartime propaganda.
He's fully aware of what he's doing.
And our sources highlight this incredibly visceral quote he wrote about his time there. He said he felt like, quote, an orange that's been trodden on by a very dirty boot.
An orange trodden on by a very dirty boot. It's such a brilliant encapsulation.
It really is.
It's this feeling of being squeezed dry, your essence extracted, and being fundamentally polluted by the machinery of the state.
I mean, he was a man who worshipped objective truth. He literally risked his life for his beliefs in Spain.
And here he was, sitting in a studio, paid by the government to construct narratives, spin news, and select or suppress facts to serve a specific political end.
So he wasn't guessing how a Ministry of Truth might operate.
Not at all. He had essentially worked in a prototype of one. He saw exactly how easy it was to manipulate the public record.
So he takes all of that, the brutal police enforcement he did in Burma, the terrifying political paranoia he survived in Spain, the literal propaganda machine he operated in London, and he distills it into the world of Airstrip 1.
Which brings us back to Winston Smith.
Right. On that bright, cold day in April, Winston is entering his apartment building, Victory Mansions. And the environment itself is so aggressively grim.
Oh, it's totally oppressive.
The hallway smells of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. The lift is broken. I mean, it's almost always broken, but right now the electric current is entirely cut off during daylight hours because of an economy drive for Hate Week.
Yeah, they're saving power for the big propaganda festival.
And Winston is only 39, but he has to stop and rest on the stairs because he has this raw, itching, varicose ulcer above his right ankle.
The physical toll described in those opening pages is not merely set dressing. It is a crucial detail of the party's control mechanism.
Okay, let me challenge that interpretation for a second.
Go for it.
When we picture dystopian control, we usually imagine something actively terrifying, right? High-tech laser prisons, sensory deprivation tanks, active physical torture.
So the cinematic stuff.
Right. But Victory Mansions is it's just a really crappy, dilapidated apartment building. It's incredibly annoying. But is a broken elevator really an instrument of state terror?
It is actually one of the most effective instruments of terror.
Really? How so?
Because it operates on the principle of cognitive load and caloric depletion. Think about the sheer dinginess, the relentless physical exhaustion of everyday life for Winston.
He does have those terrible coughing fits.
Exactly. Coughing fits that empty his lungs. The ulcer never stops itching. The food, this metallic-tasting stew and oily gin, provides no real nourishment.
That gin sounds awful, by the way.
It's basically poison. But here's the point. If you are constantly, endlessly struggling for basic physical comforts, if just walking up 7 flights of stairs consumes all your available energy, you literally have no physical or mental bandwidth left to question the broader state of the world.
Oh, wow. I see. It's a manufactured state of constant low-level physiological panic.
Yes.
You aren't in a dark box, but your world is so drained of color, flavor, and energy that your nervous system is just permanently trapped in survival mode.
You can't plot a revolution if you're agonizing over an itchy ankle and freezing in your own living room.
That makes so much sense. Psychologists call that learned helplessness, right?
Exactly. The environment constantly reinforces a feeling of absolute impotence. The party doesn't just want to police your rebellious thoughts. They want to make sure your physical body is far too exhausted to ever harbor them in the first place.
That is deeply sinister.
But the physical environment is really just the outer layer of the onion. The psychological environment is where the true panopticon is built.
Ah, the panopticon. Let's talk about the surveillance. Winston is walking up those stairs, resting on each landing, and opposite the lift shaft on every single floor, there is a massive poster.
The iconic poster.
Right. It features the face of a man about 45 with a heavy black mustache. And it's drawn in that specific, unnerving style where the eyes seem to follow you as you move.
The caption reads, "Big Brother is watching you."
But posters are just paper. It's the telescreens that are the real nightmare here. Inside Winston's flat, there is an oblong metal plaque on the wall, shaped like a dulled mirror.
And it's babbling about the production of pig iron.
Always the pig iron. You can turn the volume down, but you can never actually turn it off. And the horrifying kicker is that it transmits and receives simultaneously.
This is where Orwell explores the profound psychological burden of total surveillance. The text explicitly states that any sound Winston made above a very low whisper would be picked up.
It's so claustrophobic.
And as long as he remained within the field of vision commanded by the metal plaque, he could be seen as well as heard. But you know, the true psychological weapon isn't the camera itself.
What is it then?
It's the uncertainty.
No, right. Our sources note, quote, how often or on what system the thought police plugged in on any individual wire was guesswork.
Exactly. You never actually know if there's a human being on the other end watching you at that exact second.
This maps perfectly onto that concept of the panopticon, doesn't it? The one originally designed by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century.
Yes, the prison design.
Where a single watchman could observe all the inmates, but the inmates couldn't see the watchman. Because they never knew exactly when they were being watched, they had to assume they were being watched at all times.
And what does a human being do in that situation?
They internalize the surveillance.
Precisely. Habit becomes instinct. You become your own jailer.
It's impossible not to ask you, the listener, to just compare this to the modern world for a second. We carry our own telescreens in our pockets voluntarily.
We absolutely do.
We have smart speakers in our living rooms, constantly listening for wake words. We have cameras on our doorbells, cameras at every intersection.
The infrastructure is remarkably similar.
Now, obviously, the distinction is crucial here. Our devices generally serve corporate algorithms, trying to serve us targeted ads, right? Rather than a state thought police trying to vaporize us for ideological deviation.
Right, the motive is commercial, not strictly authoritarian.
But the sheer technological architecture of mass data collection, the fact that the erosion of individual privacy has been so thoroughly normalized, it feels strikingly uncomfortably familiar. Orwell saw the psychological implications of mass surveillance decades before the microchip even existed.
He really did. He understood that constant surveillance fundamentally alters human behavior and erodes individual identity.
Because you can't be yourself if you're always on stage.
Exactly. If you can never be truly alone, you can never truly be yourself. You're constantly performing for an audience, even if that audience is a state apparatus.
And the party takes this internal policing to an extreme biological level with the concept of face crime.
Face crime. Just the word itself implies an impossible standard.
It really does. What exactly constitutes a face crime in Newspeak?
In Newspeak, the official language of Oceania, face crime is the act of wearing an improper expression on your face.
Like looking bored during a speech.
Yes, or looking incredulous when a military victory is announced. Or even showing a flicker of anxiety when a specific name is mentioned. Even an unconscious nervous stanikick could give you away and lead to your arrest.
That is terrifying.
The thought police are so thorough and the surveillance so pervasive that you literally have to police your own autonomic nervous system.
Wait, how do you even do that? I mean, you can't consciously control your heart rate or the micro-expressions of your facial muscles if you are suddenly terrified.
It's incredibly difficult.
To avoid face crime, you would have to induce a permanent state of psychological dissociation, wouldn't you? You would have to sever your conscious mind from your physical reactions.
Precisely. You have to maintain a perfectly smooth, unreadable mask of quiet optimism at all times. The sheer mental tension of living like that, minute by minute, is just maddening.
I can't even imagine.
Which is what makes Winston's daily routine and his eventual break from it so significant. Let's look at how his day begins and the profound act of treason that follows.
Okay, so following the chronological shift here, it starts at 7:15 a.m. with the physical jerks.
The morning exercise routine.
Winston is jolted awake by an ear-splitting whistle from the telescreen. He drags himself out of bed, and we learn a tiny detail here that speaks volumes. He sleeps naked because a pair of pajamas costs 600 clothing coupons, and he only gets $3,000 a year.
Just another layer of physical discomfort.
Right, so he throws on some dingy clothes, and a shrill female voice from the screen starts barking orders at the 30 to 40 group, demanding they touch their toes.
Notice the juxtaposition here. The state mandates forced physical exertion, which stands in stark contrast to Winston's severe physical frailty.
Yeah, as he tries to exercise, he is doubled over with a violent coughing fit.
And his varicose ulcer is screaming at him.
Yet, because of the telescreen, he has to plaster a look of grim enjoyment on his face while he violently stretches his frail body.
It's an incredibly intimate violation. The state doesn't just demand your labor at the factory. It owns your morning stretch. It dictates the movement of your muscles in your own bedroom.
But despite all of this exhaustive conditioning, Winston manages to carve out a tiny, nearly invisible sliver of autonomy.
This is where things shift.
He finishes the jerks, takes a shot of Victory Gin, which the sources describe as tasting like nitric acid and hitting you like a rubber club to the back of the head, and goes to a small alcove in his apartment.
Right. Due to a quirk in the building's architecture, he can sit in this alcove and remain out of sight of the telescreen.
He can still be heard, but the camera cannot see him. And he takes an object out of a drawer, a diary.
The introduction of the diary is a massive narrative and psychological pivot.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's a thick, blank book with a red back and a marbled cover. The paper is described as beautiful, smooth, and creamy, a kind of paper that hasn't been manufactured for at least 40 years.
He bought it illicitly in a frowsy little junk shop in a slummy quarter of town.
And the way the sources emphasize the tactile nature of this object is so striking.
Why do you think the physicality of the diary matters so much?
Well, in Oceania, party members usually dictate everything into a machine called a speakwrite.
Exactly. Writing by hand is an archaic, almost forgotten manual skill. Winston has to fit a real metal nib into a wooden pen holder. He has to suck the protective grease off the nib. He dips it in a bottle of real ink.
It's because it grounds him in a physical reality that the party hasn't manufactured. It is a slow, deliberate, intensely sensory experience in a world that is fast, mechanical, and entirely numb.
He describes a literal tremor going through his bowels as he prepares to mark the paper.
Because opening this diary isn't just a hobby. He notes that nothing is technically illegal in Oceania because there are no laws anymore.
But if he is detected, he knows with absolute certainty he will be punished by death, or at best 25 years in a forced labor camp.
And yet, despite the biological terror he's experiencing, he writes, he starts by trying to establish a baseline of truth. The date. He writes April 4th, 1984.
Though he immediately realizes with a sickening sense of helplessness that he doesn't actually know for sure what year it is.
The state has muddied the historical record so thoroughly that he is essentially floating in time.
And then he hits a wall. Kind of existential writer's block.
Who is he writing this for? The future, the unborn. How do you communicate with a future generation that might live in a world where the very concepts of freedom and individual thought have been erased?
It's a paradox. He's sitting there, paralyzed by the enormity of what he's doing.
The telescreen is blaring military music. His ulcer is itching uncontrollably. He's slightly buzzed from the harsh gin. And in a state of sheer panic, his pen starts moving almost automatically.
He writes a horrific stream of consciousness account of a war film he saw the night before.
Yeah, a ship full of refugees being bombed by a helicopter, a child's arm blown high into the air, and the party audience in the cinema just laughing and applauding the carnage.
But then, as he sits there musing helplessly, his pen slides over the smooth paper again.
He prints in large, neat capitals, "Down with Big Brother," over and over again. "Down with Big Brother." Fill in half a page.
This is the critical moment of psychological transformation in the narrative.
He feels a sudden twinge of profound panic. He considers tearing the pages out and abandoning the entire endeavor.
But then he reaches a terrifying, liberating conclusion.
Quote, "Thought crime does not entail death. Thought crime is death."
Let's unpack the philosophical weight of that phrase. Thought crime is a death.
What does that actually mean for him in that moment?
By committing the act of thought crime, by putting those heretical words onto physical paper, he recognizes himself as a dead man. The thought police will inevitably get him. In his mind, it's a mathematical certainty. But paradoxically, accepting his inevitable death is the exact mechanism that frees him. Because he considers his life already forfeit, he has absolutely nothing left to lose.
Oh, wow.
He is freed from the paralyzing fear of consequences. The diary is the catalyst that moves him from passive misery to active, conscious rebellion. He decides that if he is a dead man walking, he might as well spend his remaining time seeking out the truth.
It's a breathtaking realization. He has crossed the Rubicon inside his own mind. He washes the ink off his fingers with gritty brown soap, places a microscopic speck of white dust on the diary cover so he'll know if it gets moved, and heads off to work.
Which introduces a massive logistical problem for the totalitarian state.
How so?
Well, if you have a society full of people whose natural human impulses, like keeping a private diary, falling in love, or enjoying a moment of solitude, are constantly repressed, you are building a psychological pressure cooker.
You can't just seal off all human emotion and expect the system not to explode.
You cannot. According to the hydraulic model of emotion, repressed energy doesn't disappear. It just seeks another outlet.
And the party understands this perfectly, don't they?
They do. They restrict genuine individual emotion, but they engineer highly controlled artificial outlets for all that repressed energy.
And the primary exhaust valve is an event called the 2 minutes hate.
Yes.
So Winston goes to work at the Ministry of Truth. At 11:00 a.m., the entire department drags their chairs to the center of the hall, facing the giant telescreen.
And the screen flashes the face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the ultimate enemy of the people, the primal traitor.
And the audio accompanying this, the sources describe it as a hideous, grinding screech, like a monstrous machine running without oil.
It is designed to literally set your teeth on edge and trigger a fight-or-flight response.
Goldstein supposedly commands a vast, shadowy underground army called the Brotherhood. But whether Goldstein is real or an invention of the party is entirely beside the point, right?
Entirely beside the point. The psychological brilliance of the 2 minutes hate lies in its manipulation of crowd dynamics. Have you ever noticed how, in a massive crowd, individual rational thought often evaporates, replaced by a collective primal emotion?
Absolutely. It's like an algorithmic rage bait feed on social media today, but happening in a physical room with hundreds of people.
They are hacking the human dopamine and adrenaline loops.
Within 30 seconds, uncontrollable rage breaks out in the room. People are leaping up and down in their seats, shouting at the top of their lungs, their faces turning violently red.
The total hysteria.
There's a dark-haired girl from the fiction department sitting behind Winston. She starts screaming, "Swine! Swine!" And she actually picks up a heavy Newspeak dictionary and violently hurls it at the screen.
It's a hideous ecstasy of fear and vindictiveness. The party is taking the deep, agonizing frustrations of their dingy, cabbage-smelling lives, the fact that they have no autonomy, the repressed sexuality, the physical discomfort of the itching ulcers and the cold weather, and funneling all of that generalized misery into a laser beam of directed, state-sanctioned hatred.
But the truly terrifying part is how fluid that hatred is. Winston observes his own mind during the hate.
His internal monologue there is fascinating.
1 second, he is screaming at Goldstein. The next second, he is projecting his hatred onto the dark-haired girl behind him, having these vivid, horrific hallucinations about physically hurting her.
And then it shifts again.
Yes. Then, for a flash, his hatred turns entirely against Big Brother and the party, and he feels this intense, rebellious sympathy for Goldstein.
But then, a moment later, the psychological pull of the crowd overrides him, and he is right back in sync with everyone else, chanting "BB, BB" in a slow, savage rhythm. That fluidity is the core of the psychological manipulation. The emotion is incredibly real. The rage and the adrenaline are visceral. But the object of the rage is completely interchangeable.
Because they aren't thinking rationally.
Exactly. The party has successfully severed the emotional response from any rational, analytical thought. It genuinely doesn't matter who you hate as long as you are vibrating with the raw energy of hate and ultimately surrendering that exhausted energy to the paternal image of Big Brother when his face flashes on the screen at the end of the 2 minutes.
And it's not just the hate, it's the constant mandated physical activity. Winston notes his colleague, a man named Parsons, is always organizing community hikes, voluntary extra shifts, and spontaneous demonstrations.
Later in the text, the dark-haired girl Julia provides one of the most astute analyses of this strategy.
What does she say?
She tells Winston, when you make love, you're using up energy, and afterwards you feel happy and don't give a damn for anything. They can't bear you to feel like that.
Wow.
She explains that all the marching up and down, the cheering and the waving of flags is simply sex gone sour.
Sex gone sour. That completely reframes the entire concept of state-sponsored community activities. It's not about building community at all. It's about energy depletion.
Spot on.
The party uses both fear and enforced sports activities, like the youth league and the community hikes, to keep citizens biologically exhausted. They keep your body moving and your emotional energy directed entirely outward toward the state, so you literally have nothing left in your emotional reservoir for yourself or for another human being.
Which brings us to the ultimate threat to totalitarian control: private loyalty.
Ah, yes. The family.
If you want total unquestioning obedience from a populace, you cannot allow them to be loyal to their spouses, their friends, or their children over the party. The private bonds of the family unit are a direct existential threat to the state.
We see exactly how the party neutralizes this threat when Winston has to go fix a clogged sink for his neighbor, Mrs. Parsons.
The Parsons family is a perfect, terrifying microcosm of Oceania's social engineering.
Winston goes over to their apartment. It smells of sweat and boiled cabbage. It looks like a violent animal has trampled through it. Hockey sticks, broken sports gear, and dirty dishes everywhere.
It's chaos.
The husband, Tom Parsons, isn't there. We learn Tom is a faddish, incredibly stupid, but unquestioningly loyal drudge. He is the exact kind of enthusiastically compliant citizen the party relies on even more than the thought police to keep the machinery running.
But his wife, Mrs. Parsons, is there, and she looks exhausted. She looks like she has literal dust in the creases of her face. But more importantly, she is terrified.
And we quickly learn that she is terrified of her own children.
The kids burst into the apartment. They are dressed in the uniform of the spies' blue shorts, gray shirts, red neckerchiefs.
The boy, who is only 9 years old, points a toy automatic pistol at Winston and screams, "You're a traitor! You're a thought criminal! I'll shoot you! I'll vaporize you!"
They are leaping around him with this calculating ferocity.
The sources compare it to watching tiger cubs play acting before they grow big enough to actually eat you. And the reason they are throwing a massive tantrum is because their mother won't take them to the park to watch Eurasian war prisoners be publicly hanged.
A public hanging demanded as a fun family outing. Let that sink in.
Now, wait. Let's look at this from a structural perspective. Wouldn't a totalitarian state want to promote strong traditional families? Usually, authoritarian regimes talk endlessly about family values because strong families supposedly create a strong, stable society that produces more workers and soldiers. Why target the internal family dynamics so aggressively and turn the home into a war zone?
Because a strong family represents an alternative hierarchy. It represents a private loyalty. If a child loves their mother more than they love Big Brother, that is a massive vulnerability in the system. If a husband trusts his wife enough to share a treasonous thought, the state's control is compromised.
So it can't allow any competing affections.
Yeah, exactly. The state cannot tolerate any loyalty that supersedes loyalty to the party. So they don't abolish the family, they infiltrate it.
They weaponize the children against the parents.
Yes. The party encourages parents to be fond of their children in a biological sense, but systematically, through organizations like the Spies, they turn the children into ungovernable little fanatics.
It's basically brainwashing from birth.
They teach them to adore the party, the militaristic songs, the dummy rifles. All their natural childhood ferocity is cultivated and turned outward against traitors. The sources explicitly note that it was, quote, almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children.
Because the state media is constantly running stories about child heroes who eavesdropped on their parents, caught them committing thought crime, and turned them into the thought police.
It happens all the time in the book.
You have created a society where your own 9-year-old child is a live-in agent for the secret police. If you talk in your sleep, your child might report you.
The fear of your own offspring is the ultimate destruction of private, interpersonal loyalty.
Your home is no longer a sanctuary. It is just an extension of the panopticon, staffed by your own flesh and blood.
It is the total eradication of trust. But you know, the party doesn't just want to punish rebellion after the fact with the thought police or child informants. That's reactive.
What's the proactive approach?
They want to go infinitely deeper. They want to make rebellion conceptually impossible. They want to alter the architecture of the human mind itself.
Which brings us to one of the most famous and linguistically terrifying inventions in modern literature newspeak.
The deliberate shrinking of the human mind.
We see this vividly when Winston is in the ministry canteen eating this horrible metallic-tasting stew, and he ends up talking to a colleague named Syme.
Syme is a philologist, a language expert.
Right. He is working on the 11th edition of the Newspeak dictionary. And Syme isn't just doing a job. He is incredibly, genuinely passionate about his work. He tells Winston with a sort of pedant's glee, It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words.
The destruction of words. It runs completely counter to how human beings naturally view language.
Yeah, normally we want more words, not fewer.
In every culture on Earth, language evolves to expand. We invent new words to capture newly discovered nuances, to describe complex emotions, to build bridges of intricate understanding.
But Syme's entire profession is to take a conceptual machete to the dictionary and hack away the nuances.
Syme explains the core strategy to Winston. He says, why do we need the word bad? The word good already contains its opposite. If you want to say something is bad, just use the word ungood.
It's an exact mathematical opposite.
Right. What about words like excellent or splendid? Syme argues they're just vague, useless words. If you want to say something is very good, just use plus good, or double plus good if you want something even stronger.
This is an extreme application of linguistic determinism, isn't it? Like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Exactly. The idea that the structure of a language heavily influences or completely determines the modes of thought and behavior characteristic of the culture in which it is spoken.
So if you don't have the word, you can't have the thought.
As Syme proudly states, don't you see that the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? By actively eliminating the words required to articulate complex, nuanced, or rebellious ideas, the party is actively preventing citizens from forming those thoughts in their own brains.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I try to imagine it like, it's like trying to build a complex architectural blueprint for a skyscraper, but the state has confiscated all of your rulers, your protractors, and your levels, and left you with only a sledgehammer.
That's a great analogy.
You literally lack the tools of precision required to build a rebellious thought. Imagine you are a citizen of Oceania, and you feel a deep, agonizing sense of oppression. You feel that your life is fundamentally unfair. How do you start a revolution if you literally don't have the word for revolution?
You can't.
How do you demand freedom if the word free has been stripped of its political meaning and only means the dog is free from lice? All the concepts of political liberty, human rights, choice, and independence, they don't exist anymore. They are all lumped into one single, blunt, negative word: crime-think.
Dissent becomes literally cognitively unthinkable. The party recognizes that language shapes reality. If you control the vocabulary, you dictate the boundaries of consciousness.
Chilling.
Syme tells Winston that by the year 2050, nobody will even be able to understand the conversation they are having right now. The literature of the past, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron, will be completely translated into Newspeak.
Which means their meaning will be entirely altered.
The concepts of tragedy, romance, and defiance will simply vanish from the human record.
It's intellectual starvation by design. And Syme mentions another Newspeak word that feels incredibly prescient for how modern discourse operates: duckspeak.
Ah, duckspeak.
But
To quack like a duck.
exactly. He explains that duckspeak has two contradictory meanings. If it is applied to an opponent, it is an insult, meaning they are just making mindless noise. But if it is applied to someone you agree with, to an Orthodox party member, it is the highest praise.
Because the ultimate goal of the party is to make speech independent of the higher brain centers entirely. They want people to bypass analytical thought and just rattle off orthodox slogans directly from their larynx like a duck quacking.
Orthodoxy means not thinking.
Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. The ideal citizen doesn't need to reason through a political stance. They just emit the correct noises when prompted.
And the deep tragedy of this scene is that Winston realizes, as he listens to Syme eagerly explain all of this, that Syme is doomed.
Yeah, Syme is too smart.
He understands the mechanics of the language destruction too clearly. Winston knows with absolute chilling certainty that Syme will eventually be vaporized by the party. He lacks the protective, unquestioning stupidity that the party ultimately requires for survival.
So if the party is controlling the future by narrowing the language and shrinking the capacity for thought, how do they handle the past?
Well, without a robust language to define current reality, the only tether a human being has to objective truth is their own memory and the historical record. If you remember that things used to be better, you might rebel. So the party attacks history itself. They wage a ceaseless institutional war on memory.
This brings us to the core function of the Ministry of Truth, which is where Winston actually works. We dive into the epistemology of Oceania, how the state defines what is real and what is not.
Winston's job in the records department is staggering in its implications. He sits in a cubicle. On one side of the wall is a pneumatic tube where his assignments arrive. On the other side is a slit in the wall called a memory hole, which connects directly to a massive hidden furnace in the basement.
The memory hole is the physical mechanism by which inconvenient facts go to die.
Winston receives slips of paper ordering him to alter past issues of the Times. For example, Big Brother recently made a speech praising a specific person who has now fallen out of favor, been purged, and vaporized.
He is an unperson. He no longer exists.
Now, Big Brother cannot ever be wrong. Therefore, the historical record must be retroactively changed so that Big Brother never praised that person in the first place.
So what is Winston's solution to this problem? How does he alter the past?
He literally invents a completely fictional war hero out of thin air named Comrade Ogilvy. He writes an article detailing Ogilvy's heroic life, his unquestioning devotion to the party, and his glorious death in battle.
Total fabrication.
Exactly. He submits this total fabrication. The original newspaper containing the praise for the purged man is retrieved from the archives and dropped into the memory hole to be incinerated, and the new fabricated paper is reprinted and filed in its exact place.
Comrade Ogilvy, a man who never drew a single breath, is now a permanent historical fact. And the man who was actually vaporized never existed at all.
It is the total institutionalized mutability of truth. And the scale of this operation is staggering. The text notes that this continuous retroactive alteration is applied not just to newspapers, but to books, pamphlets, posters, films, soundtracks, and photographs.
All history was a palimpsest, scraped clean and reinscribed exactly as often as was necessary.
A palimpsest. I was trying to think of a modern equivalent for this level of historical manipulation. Today we have internet retractions or deepfake videos where you can map someone's face onto another body.
We have bot farms amplifying false narratives to rewrite the consensus of what happened yesterday.
Right. But even in our digital age, there is almost always an original source somewhere. The Wayback Machine, a hidden screenshot, a cached file on a server. Someone, somewhere, has the receipts.
In Oceania, the Ministry of Truth ensures that no original copy survives. The alteration becomes the absolute singular reality.
But this requires a profound psychological mechanism from the people executing the lies. It leads to the ultimate psychological demand of the party. Doublethink.
Doublethink.
Wait, I'm genuinely struggling with the mechanics of doublethink. How can a human brain genuinely hold two contradictory facts as the absolute truth at the exact same time? That goes against basic cognitive function. Are the party members just pretending to believe the lie out of fear of the thought police?
No, that is the terrifying brilliance of doublethink. It is not pretending. It is a highly trained form of controlled insanity.
Controlled insanity.
Yes, you must consciously use your full intelligence to forge the document, fully aware that you are constructing a lie. But the exact moment you drop the original truth into the memory hole, you must immediately, unconsciously forget that you altered it.
That sounds impossible.
You must genuinely, fundamentally believe the new lie is the absolute truth, while simultaneously retaining the ability to alter it again tomorrow. To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies. It is the conscious induction of cognitive dissonance.
The sheer mental exhaustion of maintaining that, it breaks your brain just trying to comprehend doing it for a single day, let alone a lifetime.
But it is necessary to uphold the core party slogan regarding time and power. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past.
Right.
If you, as the state, dictate what happened yesterday, you can logically justify whatever you want to do tomorrow. And because you hold a monopoly on power and violence today, nobody can stop you from rewriting yesterday.
As Winston navigates this labyrinth of lies, he realizes that if there is any hope of stopping this cycle, it cannot come from within the party. The party members are too deeply brainwashed by doublethink.
They're a lost cause.
He decides that if there is hope, it lies in the proles, the proletarians, the working class that makes up roughly 85% of the population of Oceania.
Why does he place his entire hope for the future of humanity on them?
Because the party largely ignores them. The official party slogan is, "Proles and animals are free." The party doesn't bother utilizing telescreens in their homes or indoctrinating them with doublethink because they don't view them as an intellectual or political threat.
They do the heavy lifting, essentially.
Yeah, the proles do the heavy physical labor, they drink cheap beer, they care about the lottery, they argue over petty grievances. But crucially, because they aren't micromanaged by the thought police, they have retained their memory. They have retained their private loyalties. They still care about each other, rather than just the state.
As Winston says, they have stayed human.
But the tragedy is, they were entirely unconscious of their own massive potential power.
Winston observes a profound catch-22 regarding the proles. Until they become conscious, they will never rebel. and until after they have rebelled, they cannot become conscious.
They have the numbers to overthrow the state in an afternoon, but they lack the conceptual framework to even realize they are oppressed on a systemic level.
It is deeply tragic. So Winston is essentially alone in his rebellion, except for Julia, the dark-haired girl he initially aided, with whom he begins a secret, wildly dangerous love affair.
In their attempt to carve out a tiny, private world of truth and human connection brings us to the final, harrowing dissent. What happens when an individual attempts to hold on to objective reality in a world where reality is dictated entirely by the state?
To understand the resolution of Winston's rebellion, we have to talk about O'Brien. He is arguably one of the most fascinating, complex, and terrifying characters in 20th century literature.
Winston is deeply drawn to O'Brien, who is a powerful, imposing member of the inner party. During that 2 minutes hate we talked about earlier, Winston caught O'Brien's eye for a fraction of a second, and he felt this profound, absolute certainty that O'Brien was a secret rebel, a member of the underground brotherhood.
O'Brien even appeared in Winston's dream years ago, saying the cryptic phrase, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness."
O'Brien represents the ultimate paradox for Winston. He is Winston's great hope. He is an intellectual equal, perhaps the only person in Oceania who truly, deeply understands how Winston's mind works. He understands the longing for truth.
But he is also, we tragically discover, Winston's ultimate torturer.
The betrayal is absolutely devastating. Winston and Julia are inevitably caught by the thought police. They are taken to the Ministry of Love, which, ironically and horrifyingly, is the literal place where there is no darkness, because the glaring white lights in the windowless cells are never, ever turned off.
And it's O'Brien who steps into the cell to oversee Winston's interrogation and systematic torture.
The extended scenes between Winston and O'Brien in the Ministry of Love are not just scenes of physical torture, though the physical pain inflicted is horrific.
They are profound philosophical debates about the nature of reality and power.
O'Brien makes it clear that the party's goal is not merely to extract a confession or punish a crime. The party already knows everything Winston has done. As O'Brien says, we are not interested in those stupid crimes that you have committed. The party is not interested in the overt act. The thought is all we care about. We do not merely destroy our enemies, we change them.
They don't want to create martyrs. If they just shoot Winston, he dies hating Big Brother, which means he wins.
Right.
O'Brien wants to cure Winston of his insanity. He wants Winston to genuinely fully believe that 2 + 2 = 5 if the party says it does.
Winston tries desperately to cling to objective reality. He argues with O'Brien, saying, the solid world exists, its laws do not change, stones are hard, water is wet. He argues that reality is external, objective, and independent of human perception.
And O'Brien systematically crushes that argument using a terrifying philosophical framework. O'Brien tells him, reality is not external. Reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. Whatever the party holds to be truth is truth.
That's collective solipsism, isn't it?
It is. Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. The party has scaled this up. The party controls the minds of all its members. Therefore, the party collectively controls reality itself. If the party states that it can levitate, and everyone collectively believes they are levitating, then in the only reality that matters, human perception, they are levitating.
But historically, every dictator has an excuse for why they need this level of control. Winston assumes O'Brien will give the standard tyrant's justification, that human beings are weak, frail creatures who need guidance, that the party reluctantly took power for the greater good of humanity to eventually create a utopia where everyone is equal and happy. Power is usually a means to an end.
But O'Brien strips away all the comforting illusions. He delivers the naked, unvarnished truth of totalitarianism.
He says, the party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power.
They are the priests of power. They know they aren't building a utopia. They are actively, consciously building a world of fear, treachery, and torment. A world that will grow more merciless as it refines itself.
O'Brien gives us the defining, unforgettable image of authoritarianism. He says, if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
God, it's so incredibly bleak.
It is. But even after months of torture, even after his body is broken, Winston tries to hold on to one final, microscopic piece of his humanity. He tells O'Brien that he hasn't betrayed Julia.
Right, he means he has confessed to everything, he has implicated her in crimes, but he hasn't stopped loving her. In his heart, his private loyalty remains intact.
So O'Brien, Understanding exactly what must be done to complete the cure takes Winston to Room 101.
Room 101 is the final stage of reintegration. It contains the worst thing in the world, and the worst thing in the world is not a universal constant. It varies from person to person. The party uses its mass surveillance to know exactly what phobia will break your specific mind.
For Winston, it's rats. It's a primal, unreasoning terror. O'Brien straps Winston to a chair and brings in a wire cage containing two massive, starving sewer rats. He plans to fit a mask to Winston's face and open the door, allowing the rats to bore into Winston's eyes and tongue.
And in that moment of ultimate, blind, biological panic, Winston's spirit finally shatters.
He screams the only thing that can save him. Do it to Julia. Do it to Julia. Not me. Julia. I don't care what you do to her. Tear her face off. Strip her to the bones. Not me, Julia.
He transfers his punishment to the only person in the world he truly loved. And in doing so, he mathematically breaks his own internal loyalty. The final tether to his own humanity, his own ego, is severed.
Yeah.
You cannot love someone after you have genuinely wished for them to be eaten alive so that you might be spared.
The betrayal is complete. He is eventually released back into society, a hollow shell of a human being. He sits at the Chestnut Tree Cafe drinking oily victory gin. He listens to the telescreen announce a military victory, and he feels genuine joy. The novel ends with him realizing he loves Big Brother. He has been completely rewritten.
The party didn't just kill him. They hollowed out his soul and filled the empty space with themselves.
It is the ultimate horrifying victory of the state over the individual soul, the absolute triumph of engineered reality.
It really is.
Okay, let's pull back and synthesize this massive journey we've just taken. We started by exploring how George Orwell's real-world experiences with imperialism in Burma, political purges in Spain, and wartime propaganda at the BBC forged his deep understanding of authoritarian mechanics.
We looked at how a state uses physical exhaustion, the dingy, crumbling environment of victory mansions, to enforce cognitive depletion and breed helplessness.
We examine the architecture of the panopticon, the ubiquitous telescreens, the concept of face crime, and the profound psychological terror of living as your own internal jailer, forced to police your own autonomic nervous system.
We analyzed the tactile neuroscience of rebellion, watching Winston try to reclaim his mind simply by putting a pen to creamy paper, realizing that accepting his own mortality was the only path to intellectual freedom.
We dissected the engineering of mass emotion in the 2 Minutes Hate, exploring how the party caps the volcano of human sexuality and private love and channels that energy into a fever pitch of state-sanctioned algorithmic rage. We saw the family unit infiltrated and weaponized, turning children into live-in spies and destroying the sanctuary of the home.
We explored the terrifying linguistic determinism of Newspeak, shrinking the human mind by literally destroying the vocabulary required to form complex or rebellious thoughts. We visited the memory holes in the Ministry of Truth, witnessing the institutionalized gaslighting of doublethink and the creation of alternative facts.
And finally, we descended into the glaring lights of the Ministry of Love, where O'Brien laid bare the true naked face of authoritarianism. Power pursued entirely for power's sake, achieved by obliterating objective reality and mathematically breaking the human capacity for love and private loyalty in Room 101.
Orwell's blueprint shows us that by controlling the physical environment, the family dynamic, the vocabulary of dissent, and the historical record, a state can literally rewrite human nature itself.
And while 1984 paints a very specific, extreme, mid-20th century dystopian vision, the underlying psychological mechanisms, the alteration of truth, the deliberate restriction of complex thought, the trading of privacy for convenience, the polarization of mass hatred, these are not relics of the past.
There are mechanisms that are deeply embedded in the architecture of our modern world, and they require constant, rigorous vigilance from all of us.
Which leaves you, listening right now, with the final provocative thought to mull over. Orwell showed us that whoever controls the past controls the future. In our era, our photos, our private messages, our financial records, and the very proof of our relationships are almost entirely digital.
Stored on servers we don't control.
Exactly. They live as code on massive corporate servers that we do not own and we do not control. If someone or some opaque algorithm decided to hit delete on your personal history tomorrow, if the digital record of your life was wiped or even quietly, subtly altered, how would you prove who you were yesterday? How would you hold on to the memory of a pivotal moment in your life if every screen in the world told you it never actually existed?
It's a terrifying question to consider.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the mechanics of 1984. We hope it gave you some profound aha moments and plenty to think about regarding the nature of truth and power. We can't wait to crack open the next stack of sources with you. Until next time, keep questioning the narrative, keep reading, and keep your memories fiercely close.